Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being with us for today's webinar, Smooth Sailing for MSPs with HCI, brought to you by Scale Computing. A few reminders before we get started. The webinar is being recorded. You will receive an email in a couple of days with a link to view the webinar on demand. Also, this webinar is interactive, so you can use the Q&A widget on your screen to enter your question. It'll disappear from your side and show up on ours, but don't worry, we have it and we'll answer those questions at the end. If we don't get to your question, we will be able to follow up with you after the presentation today. There's also a live chat, so jump in and have a conversation with your fellow IT pros. If you prefer not to use the chat, you can always turn that off with the orange icon buttons at the bottom of your screen. Also, don't forget to check out the handout section. It's got several files available for download, so take a look at that. So let's get started. Our speaker today is Scott Mann, Director of North American Channel Scale Computing. So with that, I'll hand it to you, Scott.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all. Thanks everybody for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about our new MSP program that we launched back in June of this year. Getting a little bit more details about the partner presentation and everything. But as for an agenda, we're going to start off and just give you an overview of the HCI market. So really what led us to this point, who we are as a company, what we do, what really differentiates us, what makes us unique in this market, and then what specific target markets we address, which has specifically led us to this MSP program. And then we'll dive into a little bit about the HCI for MSPs, so what that program really entails, who it's really targeted towards, what those offerings can look like, pricing around that, how that monthly recurring pricing looks, why we structured it that way. And then we'll do a brief overview of the partner program. Won't go into too much details about that. And depending on how much time we have left, I will probably dive into the UI and show you some failover scenarios that you guys can probably relate to, and especially in the MSP world. So kicking things off, status of the HCI market. So depending on which analyst you look at, Gartner, IDC, they all have a very similar graph or analysis of where the hyperconverged market is going. The reason I really like this graph here is because it shows an exponential increase in the hyperconverged market. And the reason that I see that it's vastly outgrowing the traditional network and storage refreshes is because hyperconverged technology can benefit a lot of other areas in the technology world that traditional networking and storage pricing was never really built for. Things like edge computing, IoT, and what we're here to talk about today, MSPs, that there really hasn't ever been a true solution on the storage and server side for it. It's always just been a slimmed down version of an enterprise solution. And then on the bottom right there, the last point that I want to hit on is KVM-based or VMware alternatives are the fastest growing subsegment within that HCI market. And there's a reason why I want to talk about that. That segues nicely into my next slide, a little history on Scale. So Scale was incorporated in 2008, so roughly just over 10 years now. In 2010, we adopted KVM as our underlying hypervisor. And in 2012, we launched as a hyperconverged solution, and we launched as a VMware alternative. And funny enough, we actually launched at VMworld. So needless to say, we were never invited back after that, but it was a very bold way to launch a product that was an alternative to a large solution in the industry at the time. Since then, we've really seen a large shift to the KVM market. You've seen Google adopted it. Apple was probably the biggest loss for them moving from VMware over to KVM. In 2016, we had over 1,500 customers that adopted Scale at that point. And the main one that I wanted to touch on there is in 2018, we launched our Edge solution, HC3 Edge, and that really was the start of the MSP program. That was the fundamental product that we built the MSP program around, which I'll get into more details in a second here. But who is Scale? I like to say Scale is the best kept secret in the industry, just because when we launched, we have thousands of customers, tens of thousands of systems out there. But when we launched, we very much launched as a product-focused company. We didn't launch as a brand or a marketing company. So we were very focused on building a rock-solid product with exceptional support, a product that was easy for us to support, and more importantly, the product that was easy for our partners to support so that their customers have an exceptional experience. And the reason that we did that approach is not to say one approach is better than the other, but when we launched for the small and mid-market. So that's a market that you have to be really cost effective in. So by putting all the money into marketing and PR, you're really driving up the cost for that end customer. And we wanted to make a product that will speak for itself, and that's really how we grew out of that. That grew to thousands of customers from more of a product approach than a marketing and PR side, and that evolved into distributed enterprises. But it all came back down to the DNA of scale, which was building a product around support, not building support as an add-on to the product. We wanted to make sure that it was the best experience you ever had with any product you've ever, from technology side of things, the things that you have on your house. It is the best support experience that you'll ever get, and it really services all industries. I'll get into the target markets and everything in a second here, but just proof is in the pudding. You guys are obviously all familiar with Spiceworks. Go look us up on Spiceworks, Google us. There's Gartner peer reviews, there's Tech Validate, there's Trust Radius, a ton of different peer review sites. We are the most reviewed and the highest rated HCI solution. And typically when you go to review any product, or think about when you go out to a restaurant, you're going to go on Yelp after. You're typically going to give it a review because you had an exceptional experience or because you had a very poor experience. For us, we built that product, and our customers go out of their way to speak about the great experience that they had, not only with the product, but with the support itself. So I encourage anybody after this call, go out there, Google us, find any different reviews that you have on us. We can send you to Tech Validate and Trust Radius sites as well, and you'll see nothing but good things about us. A quick overview of HC3. I like to start off with the cliche of a hyperconvergence, the definition, because hyperconvergence has become one of those very subjective terms. It's similar to cloud. Cloud means something different to everybody. Hyperconvergence means something different to everybody in every different market and the vendors that serve those different markets. We coined that term hyperconvergence, and the way we intended it, it was not just a bunch of hardware stacked together. It was the servers, it was the storage, and it was the more important part is the software integrated as one cohesive layer. So the server, storage, and virtualization as one single cohesive system, not another software layer on top of everything. And that right there is the foundational difference of what makes us unique in this market. And when I get into the target markets, why we serve those markets better than anybody else in the industry can, it's very much we've created a product that is super efficient. It is minimal resource consumption, and I'll actually get to the next slide and give you an example of it. So on the left side there, you're going to see a VSA model. A VSA is a virtual storage appliance. So that's the competitive approach. That's the much more enterprise approach. A customer that's using VMware Enterprise Plus and they're going to a hyperconverged solution, they need to just add on software on top of it as it acts as a mediator, but that software that you're adding on top of it ends up consuming a ton of resources. There ends up being an OS. Just from powering it on, the OS is going to consume anywhere from 96 to 300 gigs of RAM in a 3-node system, so that, like you saw on that previous slide, basically 3 servers and 12 cores. For us, a lot of our customers can live on 96 to 30 gigs of RAM and 12 cores. Obviously, we can scale up much larger than that, but the reason that we can offer such a solution like that is because of the architecture that we designed. That architecture you see on the right side there, that's the scale data path. See, it's just a couple hops. It writes essentially directly to disk, and then it redundantly writes onto a second drive in another node in the cluster. But we're consuming a fraction of a core and less than 6 gigs of RAM. So we can run on the smallest of workloads, and when you are running on these average size workloads, we're not consuming nearly as much resources just to power it on. You can use the resources that you paid for. So with that said, that's really why that foundational difference of that architecture is why we are a great fit on the left side there in the SMB market. And the way I like to structure this slide is it's kind of a history of where we evolved as a product. We started it in the markets that we serve. We started in the SMB market. We evolved to the distributed enterprises, and then we just launched this MSP program earlier in the summer. And I'll talk a little bit more about what each of those means. So SMB to us, it's a another very ambiguous term. SMB to us really means minimal IT resources. Typically, you're looking at customers anywhere from 100 seats to maybe 1,500 seats, but depending on the vertical, that'll all vary. really any vertical across the board, what makes a good customer for us in that small to mid-market is typically an IT team that is a smaller shop. Usually we say under 10 in IT, but the ideal is probably 1 to 5 in IT. And that's where you as MSPs, that's where your value is, because they're outsourcing some of their resources to your technology, to your experience that you have in that specific field. Now that evolved into distributed enterprises, and what a distributed enterprise is think about like retail, think gas stations, convenience stores. It is a lot of small, medium-sized organizations that are all centrally managed. So if you have a retail that could be globally, it could be all based in North America, and they're all centrally managed, but on site they don't have those. They have very limited IT staff. Usually they don't have any IT staff, and they have minimal resources on what the cluster or what the actual infrastructure requires. We can run on those small micro data centers, and we can manage all of those micro data centers, whether it's across the U.S. or globally, from one single console. So now you can kind of picture what that means. That's essentially what an MSP is. An MSP is a distributed enterprise for your customers. You're managing a bunch of different customers, all varying in sizes, all varying in verticals, all varying in expertise, and you're essentially managing that. You're essentially managing all of them, and you want to have that capability where you can manage them all remotely and not have to be on site. The more time you have to spend on site, the more resources you're consuming, the lower your profits are. So HCI for MSPs. We did a lot of research with our existing partner base and out in the industry. And what HCI for MSPs means to us is really a lot of our customers identified with what we call a single server client. So on the left side there, you'll see the single server scenario. Where it be a Dell, a Lenovo, an HP server with minimal resources running VMware or Hyper-V. Typically, we'll see anywhere from 2 to 6 VMs being run on that. And then locally, you'll have some sort of backup appliance for a quick restore, and then that'll typically be replicated off-site to to your private cloud or to that backup vendor's private cloud. Now, in a scenario like that, you don't quite have the complexity of a 3-2-1 like you'll see on the left side here. You don't have multiple host servers. You don't have a SAN at all. The networking isn't quite as complex. You don't have the complexity of needing the redundancy across the network. However, you still have the complexity of managing all these different hardware components within that single server scenario. You have different management tools. You have different backup software. Everything that has to be managed under one console, and not third-party technologies that don't necessarily work all well together. In a failure scenario, you have a third-party technology that you need to spin up everything on. The technology is probably great to spin it up on. You can get it up and running pretty quickly, but now that technology is third-party was layered on top of it. When you have to fail back to it, that's typically when you get into the headaches and you waste a lot of time and resources, fail everything back. I ran into a scenario where a customer had a power outage, and they had to fail over to a local backup appliance. They failed everything over to that backup appliance. 4 hours later, they got everything. The power was back up online, and they call up their managed service provider, and they say, hey, we're back up online. Can you get us back up on our infrastructure? And they call them back, and they say, yeah, it's going to take until Saturday, and this is Wednesday at the time, because they had to reseed everything over to the other side. And so depending on how much data you have, that can take a long time. So the fail back process isn't nearly as convenient. With scale, you can do all that under one hood. So you've got that single node that you see on the left side there. That would be placed at your client site. That's the single server replacement. It's your servers, it's your servers, meaning your compute resources, it's your storage, and it's your virtualization, all out of the box, ready to go. You plug it in, the software's already installed on it, the drives are already loaded to it, and then it's got the built-in backup and disaster recovery capabilities as well. It's not any third-party technology that you need to add on to it. It's not additional resources that you need to add. It's not another license you need to add. It's built in under the hood. So you as an MSP, you might have a data center. It's a perfect scenario to put another single node in that data center, and you can offer GR as a service for them. So a single node on the site, to a single node at the customer site. I'll show you what that process looks like, but to fail over, 3 clicks. To fail back, 3 clicks. And you don't have to reseed everything. It's going to be fast. It's going to be convenient. Now, if you have multiple customers, you can manage multiple customers from a cluster. You can have multiple customers replicating to a single cluster. Excuse me. And be offering that DR as a service. Now, if you don't have a data center, you could also leverage our Google partnership, and you can have everything replicating up to Google's cloud platform, which I'll show you when we get into the UI, what that looks like and what that really means to you. But what's important to know about the Google side of things is that you don't need to be a CSP. You don't need to be a cloud service provider. You need to be a scale partner. We are the cloud service provider. You come to us just like you'd be buying a node, but instead you're buying a node essentially in the cloud. So some of the different scenarios that you can offer to your customers. On the right side there, you'll kind of see three different clients. You'll see client one, maybe they have a full infrastructure and they need that redundancy, so they need a 3-node system. They need a system that if a node goes down, everything spins up onto the 2 remaining nodes and everything is up and running. Nobody knows anything. They're all happy. They can have multiple drive failures. They require that redundancy because of some sort of workload that they're running. Maybe it's an ERP system or some SQL databases. And typically those are going to be for your larger clients, probably 75 plus. Under there, client 2, you're going to see a single node. So that's usually you're under 100 seats. Anywhere really from 5 employees to 75 employees is where we see the most common. And then on the third side there, you're basically an employee that you're acting as the cloud for them. You're being that cloud provider for them, whether it be on Google or on your data center. So on the left side, you're offering remote management, RMM, remote management and monitoring. So you can manage all of these different clients from one single console without having to jump into a ton of different UIs. You can see it all cleanly from one single console, quick click to get into it. And on the RMM side as well, it will tie into your ConnectWise and any of your RMM tools that you're running on the other side for monitoring and to push notifications and everything to it. If you had a drive failure or something like that, we can also tie into that. But the remote management and monitoring on our side is basically being able to manage multiple clusters from a single console, whether it be 25 customers or thousands of customers. And this was really built around a feature that was for a 1,000 site deployment of a retail scenario where they're really building out a store as a service. They wanted to be able to essentially manage everything and offer a unique bundle that's pre-built, pre-packaged. They can send it out to the site. They have minimal time that they need to invest in actually doing the installation there, and they don't have to be on site. They can manage everything centrally, just like you guys want to do. And then DR as a service, that's a key one there. You're not just offering backup. You have a local backup built into it, so they need to recover a file, you recover that single file. But you also have that DR as a service. So now you can offer them DR, whether it be to our Google Cloud or to your central data center that you have or central node for them. You offer that DR as a service, and it's a premium DR that you're offering now. You can get everything up and run seamlessly. It's literally 30 minutes of downtime if you wanted to offer that, but typically you're going to offer something around 8 hours in your SLA. We can beat that with hours and hours to spare. And then on the third line down there is infrastructure as a service. So basically you're acting as a cloud provider for your clients. Some of your clients, 10 seats and under, they might be running a VM, 2 VMs, 3 VMs. You can host it all for them. If they're not in the healthcare space or financial space, then you can offer that infrastructure as a service offering for them. So what does the pricing look like? This is the U.S. pricing. We do have Canadian price books as well as European price books. I'm going to show you what the actual appliances look like from a pricing perspective in a few minutes here. But the hardware is effectively a pass-through cost. So you can either buy that outright or you can lease those nodes. Any of the nodes that we have, it's not limited to a certain sizing or anything like that. If you have our smallest nodes with a terabyte, or if you need our largest nodes with hundreds of terabytes. And then the software component is broken out of that. And so we've offered a monthly recurring cost on that, so it aligns well with the way you're charging your customers. So you either offer that 12, 24, or 36 months, depending on what you have with that customer, and it's based on the amount of drives that are in that node. So you see we have the HC1100, 1150, 1150D, and DF are all 4-drive systems. So that, as a 36 months, is about $175 a month. And then your HC5150D, which is a 12-drive system, is essentially 3 times the price of that, with a little bit of a price break there as well. So just a pricing example to see what that looks like. So up the top here, this is kind of your middle of the road, all flash single node. So 3.84 terabytes of all SSD, 128 gigs of RAM, and 24 cores. You see the hardware cost there is a one-time server cost of $7,615. The software, which includes everything, all the features that we have with it, the deduplication, the integrated backup and replication, and your full 24/7, 365 support, premium support, offered based out of the U.S. That's a monthly price of $175. Now, if you were to lease that server price, bundle it all together, you're looking at $410 a month for that single server. And then as a cluster side of it, this could be something that you're offering. So you have multiple of those single nodes out for your customers. They're all replicating back to your cluster on the bottom there. The hardware component is going to cost you $11,000. It says one-time server cost, but that should be one-time cluster cost. Picture it as being the server being the whole cluster, and that's 9 terabytes of storage, about a terabyte and a half of SSD, 192 gigs of RAM, and 24, 48 cores across the whole cluster, or 24 cores, 48 threads. And that total monthly cost with the subscription being $525, so 175 times 3 is $860. So you can see from a pricing perspective how you can bundle this and offer that premium DR and really get a great price point that you can offer to your customers and make a ton of profit off of it. So just to show the breakout of it, that 3-node cluster is, each one of them is 3 terabytes, 480 gigs. All of this is very flexible in the sizing. I like to call it the Swiss Army knife of hardware, because you can change this drive size, the SSD size, the RAM, the CPU. But that hardware cost is $3,557. So times 3 was that where we got that $11,000 cost from, and 175 times 3 is where we got that monthly cost for the software. And lastly, there's a couple other cloud options that you have here. This is kind of the middle of the road option with 4 terabytes. But if you don't want to host anything and you want to put that data set, that DR target in the cloud, you can white label this. I'll show you what it looks like. It looks like you're running a 1 node, but it's got the redundancy of obviously Google's GCP, and it's got the power of Google's data center. So you're not running on that single node where it's that single point of failure gets on the DR side, and you're running from the performance of a massive enterprise cloud. Now on the MSRP side, this is our single CPU option. So on the first one there, the HC1100, you're seeing the MSRP pricing. So when I show you the all-flash system, you'll be able to understand the pricing break that you get there. You can ignore the pricing on that. I just wanted to show you guys so you can have an understanding of how big of a price break this is. And the really reason that we built this model was because from our perspective, an MSP managing all these tens to hundreds of customers, you become that thing. You are a client. We typically don't engage with the customer. We're happy to, but once you get this up and running, you're going to be the one that's going to be contacting us. You're managing everything for the customer, and there's going to be that a knowledge transfer where you're going to become a lot more proficient with the system. So there's going to be a lot lower of overhead from our perspective. That overhead, we're offering a lower price point so that you guys can go make more profit off of it. If you guys are growing, we're growing with you. Everybody's winning. So on the left side there, the 1100 is that single node. That's an all-spinning one. The 1150, that's probably where you're going to start out as a single CPU, 3-node system, where you can get some minimal resources. You can get typically anywhere from 10 to 20 VMs on that system. The 1150D is a dual option. You'll go up to 50 VMs. The 1150DF is that all-flash. So you see that price point down there. This all-flash is going to be that. This one happens to be a 16-core, 128 gigs, and the 3.84 terabytes of RAM with 1 gig backplane, and that $18,499 price point. Remember what I showed you on the price of that single node at $410 a month. Multiply that by 36 months, you're going to get a very cost-effective solution for your customers. The 5150, that's going to be your big boy nodes. Those ones in the 3-node systems can go up to 120 terabytes. So if you have a ton of customers that you're looking to host, you want to eventually get to that point where you're hosting hundreds of customers and you're offering them that DR solution, those are going to be the nodes for you. And of course, they can scale out of three nodes. You can have, if you needed 4, 5, 6 nodes, you can scale it as needed. So a little on our scale partner community. I'm not going to dive into too much of the details. We have tons of great recordings of the different features within the partner community. The one thing I did want to touch on was that within CRN, we have a 5-star on the partner program guide, so we were a winner of that in 2018. So we have a very comprehensive partner community. In terms of the resources available, what I like to say is we have everything that you need from start to finish of the sale, and we're there to handhold you through the whole process, take the heavy lifting off of it, but there are also the resources available to you. So once you get up and running, once you start to comprehend this and you become proficient with pitching it and your customers are onboarding quickly, you can use our sizing tool. We have assessment tools. You can run ROI tools for your customers to show what it's going to look like in comparison to a traditional. And all these resources are available to you within our partner community. And in terms of really what we're looking for here, within our MSP program, we're in the business of helping to make you money. We want to build a use case with you so that you can build a business plan around this to offer to your customers, make profit off of it. We want you to make a lot of money, that you're lowering your overhead with your resources. You don't need to use your advanced resources on managing a system that's up and running. You can make higher profits off of it and grow alongside of it. That's it on the PowerPoint slides here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the UI. I'm going to do a quick run through the UI here. I'm just going to show you what a failover scenario looks like. Let me share my screen. Perfect. All right. So you see I'm just up in an HTML5 browser. I happen to be in Google. So this is this up here you see in the URL, that's the IP address of one of the nodes. So this here happens to be a 3-node system. So this would be a cluster that you're hosting. It's your central data center where you're hosting a bunch of different customers for it. At the top there, CPU, RAM, and storage, that's going to be the combined resources across all 3 of the nodes. So those ones are there. As long as everything's in the green, that means that you have enough capacity that if you were to lose a node, everything would fail over the remaining nodes without you having to touch anything. Once it goes over that 2/3 rule, so once it goes over that 67% mark, it's going to notify you. You're going to get notifications, whether you're hooked up into your ConnectWise or whether you're just getting the email alerts that we send out. You get the notifications that, hey, redundancy is degraded. At this point, we don't have enough resources on 2 of the 3 nodes if one of the nodes were to fail. Down here, you'll see the boxes. All of these boxes are VMs. So you see in total we have 53 VMs, 30 of those are running. And on each one of the VMs, you'll see some unique gas gauges as well, where those are the resources for the specific VMs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up a new VM. This is kind of the long way of starting from scratch. So let's call this, I'm just going to go SW1, because I'll make a couple of these. Whatever this is, finance database. We're going to tag this. We're going to put this in. Let's just go with SW again. You can do additional tags if you want to do things like unique identifiers like 2012 R2. Your OS, anything that'll run on an x86 will run on us. Your CPUs you're going to choose. Your memory. You get 16 gigs. You can add additional drives as well. You can do this later on or you can do this ahead of time. And then you're going to choose where to boot from. Windows 2012 R2, click create. So it didn't take too long to do, but the reason that I said that that's kind of the long way around it is if I go down here into my templates, I'm going to have a 2012 R2 template. So right here, we've got our 2012 R2 base. You'll see on the bottom here, this one that looks like another couple of VMs side by side. That's how you clone out a VM. So instead of starting from scratch on a brand new Windows machine and having to go through that 45-minute sys prep process, you can click this clone VM. Let's call this SW2. And we're going to put that back into the SW as well. And then you're going to click clone. So now I've got a fully sys prep machine. When I boot this up, I'm not going to have to go through the process of reboot until Windows is happy. I'll have a fully sys prep machine, basically like a golden template that you can use and spin up, whether you're spinning up 4 or 5 VMs for your customers or hundreds of VMs. I'm going to click power on this. Now under the power button, that's going to be the console right there. So I'm going to click on the console, and I'm sure you've seen this many times, but this is just Windows booting up. So you're going to see that Windows screen popping up, and it's going to be Windows booting up. This is actually starting from scratch, but this would be a fully sys prep machine in this scenario. And then you can do things like snapshotting on it. You see on the right side there. So we're going to take a snapshot of this VM. We're going to call this test1, snapshot that. So what a snapshot is you basically be able to recover that full VM, or you can recover specific files from it. And it's not a linked snapshot. So you're not taking a snapshot with a hierarchy. Each one is a metadata tag, so it's referencing a specific point in time and has no relation to the one prior or the one after it. So whatever would happen if you were to delete, if there's a ransomware attack or something like that, and you needed to scroll back to 10 snapshots ago, you can restore from that 10th snapshot, and none of the other ones will be affected by it. Or if one of the snapshots becomes corrupt, nothing's going to happen. And you can see how quickly I took that snapshot. We're going to go into the bottom tab here, and you're going to see the snapshot, and I am now ready to clone out from the snapshot like I just cloned out from the template. But of course, doing those manual snapshots is great, but you're not going to have the time. You don't want to do that on a daily basis. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into the settings tab here, and you're going to see I have a ton of different options. You're going to first click on the schedules. After you set everything up, this is going to be your go-to one right here. You're going to add schedule. Let's call this one SW, mission critical. You're going to add your different frequencies. So whatever your occurrences are, every 1 day, every 30 seconds, every 30 minutes, sorry, keep 2 days. I'm going to choose minutely, which I'm not sure is an actual word. It could be minutely. We'll say it is. I'm going to keep that for 2 days. But you probably want that's going to be kind of your get out of jail free card. You're going to also probably want to do every day, every 1 day, or every 2 days. Keep 2 months. Every 2 day, you choose the time you want to do that, and we're going to keep that for 8 weeks. So you can choose as many different recurrences as you want. Click Save. Go back into that VM, and you're just going to select that schedule that you just chose. SWMC. Click Update. Now, based on those recurrences that I set, I'm going to have a snapshot or recovery point every time. So this is going to start taking snapshots every 30 minutes. I'm going to start with an initial one, and you're going to be able to recover from any one of those. Now that's great and dandy. You can recover from something like a ransomware attack or a deleted file, even if you needed to recover from something. If you had a customer call and it's the CEO that happened to delete an important picture and they want that recovered, you can get that back seamlessly, literally in a couple of clicks. But you want to get that data off-site. So you're offering DR as a service to your customer. You need to be able to get that data off to another cluster. So if you go back into the settings console, you will have seen that there's remote clusters there. We're going to click on remote clusters. We already have these connections established. So you see we've got a CA Prod 1, DRBC, Robo, and US Unity. So you see at the top, I've already got these spun up. So there's the Unity one and the Robo one. But to add the cluster, it's seamless. You add the IP address of whatever that node or one node within the cluster is, the username and password that you would have used to log into it. You click create. It's going to handshake with that external cluster, and it's going to send all its details. The external cluster is going to give it the handshake back as well. So it's going to establish a mutual connection. So it's not just a one-way connection like you'd have with a traditional third-party backup product, which is why it makes it so easy to fail back, because they both establish a connection with each other, and they're both live running clusters or nodes. You can run production workloads on either side and replicate back and forth to whichever one you needed to replicate to. You can see all the different resources that are being consumed on each one of the nodes. If I did want to jump into it, I can just quickly click on that button right there. This isn't the multi-cluster management console, but this is good if you have just a few clusters running, everything's under one screen. You can see exactly what's happening into it, and it'll show you if there's any notices or anything that you need to be aware of on the right side there. Let's go back into that VM. What we're going to do is now we're going to set up the replication. So now we've got our snapshot scheduled. We're going to have our local recovery points. We're going to set up the replication, and let's send it over to Robo, that remote branch office. We're going to click replicate. Now what's going to happen is these snapshots, which you're going to see on once it starts to send it over there, these snapshots are going to send over the differentials. So you're going to send it over to the other side so you can recover from any secondary site. Replicated over here. Now it's still going to be replicating over, it's still going to be sending the data over, so that'll take some time depending on the bandwidth. But if you wanted to recover from the VM on this side, it's literally a matter of 3 clicks. This right here, you can see, doesn't have the same functionality as a fully powered on VM, so you can click that button up at the top there to clone out, or if you want to choose a snapshot you want to recover from, you can see that this one's got a 15-minute snapshot. choose the one that you want to recover from, clone it out. At that point, you make any DNS changes that need to be made, power it up, and everything's up and running in a couple clicks. Now, when that cluster becomes back up online, all you're going to do is you're just going to send this new VM, you're going to send it back. And it's just going to replicate back to that existing VM on the main cluster, and it's just going to send over the block changes. So if it was down for 4 hours, it'll send over whatever those changes happened over those 4 hours so that the production is up to speed and you didn't lose any data. You didn't lose any data over that time. And that's how you fail back seamlessly. So it's literally just a matter of going back over here and replicating it back over to US Prod. Simple like that. And with that said, that is everything that I had for the overview of the UI. At this point, I think I'll pass it back to you, David, if you want to run through any questions or anything that they had during the presentation.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great questions, and remember, everyone, you can continue to do that using the Q&A widget on your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can. So let's just dive into it. This first one here is, can any operating system work on a scale device? Can Linux
yes,
work as well?
Yep, and we do have, if you wanted to, you can Google scale computing and operating system supported, and it'll show you a list of all the different Linux OSs that are supported, but anything that'll run on Intel x86 will run on us. You can even see on that cluster that I had there that you'll even see that there's some Windows 10 machines and everything running as well.
All right, this next one comes from Shelby, and she's asking, how well can you scale from SMB to large enterprise? Do you target a certain industry?
I wouldn't say we target a specific industry. It's a great question. We really, on the small side, we can handle anything from 100 seats and under to the smallest of customers that are running less than a terabyte. On the large side, our largest customer is running 1.5 petabytes. So with those 2 U nodes, the 5150s that I was referring to, in a 3-node system, you get 120 terabytes of usable capacity. So you can stack those up. They're happy to be running about 1.5 petabytes. I wouldn't say that that's our normal use case. Typically, we really fall into the mid-market where it's anywhere from a terabyte to hundreds of terabytes. But really what defines a good customer for us is usually a smaller IT team. So if they have 5 users or below, that's a great fit for us. And that's why distributed enterprise is on the large scale. Our largest deployment is going to be thousands of sites, retail, consumer, thousands of sites across the globe. So that's the perfect fit for us because it's not necessarily petabytes of storage. It's just a lot of stores, thousands of stores that need a cost-effective, redundant cluster.
All right, let's look at this next one. How do you migrate Hyper-V and VMware to the scale environment?
That's a great question, and I think during my presentation I was talking about some of the resources that we have. We have videos and everything on the migration process and how to do all that. You can leverage. We have a HC3 migration tool, which you can migrate any operating system from a physical machine to a VMware Hyper-V over to scale. That's like your seamless failover essentially. It's almost asynchronous. The amount of downtime that you'd have in a migration would be the restart of a VM. So however long it takes that VM to restart, it would go from your old workload, it would go from the old environment over to the new environment. And once it's up and running, all the changes would be made, and everybody would be connecting into that new cluster. You can also import VMs. So you see there's an import functionality here. This is more of the, you'd be exporting from your existing, whether it be VMware Hyper-V, it'd be a VMDK file. When you import it, it's going to make the changes into our file format, which is KVMs, which is a QCOW2 format, and then you can import it there. There's a little bit more downtime with that. And there is also information on other free tools that are available, like Clonezilla, on how to migrate from any virtual workload or physical workload over to scale. So there's a ton of different options. 90% of our customers, and I'm making that number off the top of my head, they would leverage the HC3 migration tool because it's seamless, it works, and it's fully supported.
All right, great. So this next one here is, how fast is failover and failback?
I guess a couple different scenarios that you have to look at depending on what they have in terms of bandwidth. But you saw me do the failover in that scenario. It's as quick as you can get to the secondary site and spin it up. If that U.S. production goes down, you're spinning it up over here. It's going to take a couple clicks, power it on. So I usually say you can get it up and running in under 30 minutes if you factor in making any DNS changes if you hadn't done that already. The fail back is also a little subjective depending on how much time you're running in DR, because it's going to have to send over those changes. And again, it depends on the bandwidth and how much data had changed over that time. I will say it is very efficient because it's just going to send over those block level differentials that are going to be compressed and sent over. In a scenario where it's just down for a few hours, it's not going to take much time to get up and running. If you're running in DR for hopefully not more than a week, you could have a terabyte that you need to send over. It's probably excessive, but it'll really vary based on the amount of data that you have.
Okay, let's look at this next one here. How do you access the systems to perform a shutdown on the VMs if the web interface is not available? Is this possible to safely shut down from systems through the command line?
Yeah, absolutely. You can have. I didn't go through the support side of it. Let me jump back into the cluster here. So you can have support open a tunnel where they'll jump into the command line for you. Remote support here. This is actually a really neat feature because what you're doing is you're going to open up a secure tunnel for them. You're going to give them the code of whatever it is. You're going to click open connection, and then they're going to be able to connect in on the back end. They won't see any data or anything like that. They're just going to see the command line of it, and that's everything from the virtual layer down to the storage layer. So even outside of just doing a health check of the cluster, it's very convenient because you're not relying on all of these different vendors. You don't have to call VMware, and then you don't have to call, your server manufacturer, and then your storage manufacturer, who all end up pointing the blame at Microsoft anyways, and then you call Microsoft to get it fixed. You call us, we can get everything resolved because we can stay under the hood of it all. So that's part of the reason we made the product very easy for us to support, so that end user experience, our partner experience, is exceptional. Okay,
so Native Texan is asking, how do you perform firmware updates on the nodes?
Yeah, great question. So down here, it's another one I didn't go over, but let's go through that. So updates you'll see in the console. This cluster is up to date. It's on one of the more current general releases. If there was an update available, you'd have a notification under the version here, and it would say update available. You'd click that, it'd bring you into here, it would give you all the release notes, all the functionality and everything that you're getting. You click that update button. What the update engine does is it goes to node 1 and it tells you we're about to do an update for you. It's going to automatically live migrate the VMs that are running on node 1 to the 2 remaining nodes, load balance them on the 2 remaining nodes. Node 1 is going to do all its reboots, its restarts and everything to get that newest version. Once that's finished, it's going to migrate everything back, rehydrate it, and then go to node 2 and do the same thing on node 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you have in the cluster until it's gotten through the whole cluster. So it is a seamless update. You can do it in a live production environment. You can do it during business hours. It's not I/O intensive. You click that update button, you can walk away, go to lunch, come back, and everything will be up to date.
All right, let's get a couple of more in here. Is this a VM host or a backup recovery device primarily?
It's both. We started as it evolved into being a backup and disaster recovery product, but its main purpose was to serve as a VM host. So it was that it was the combination of essentially removing a multiple host environment with 2, 3, 4 plus servers, a SAN, and the virtualization on top of it, where you're running the VMs on top of all of that. So you'd run that as a scale cluster, but then we built in the functionality to have that snapshotting, be able to recover from the snapshots. It's got the VSS integration, so if you're running a SQL database, if you're running Office, Exchange, or anything like that, it'll be application crash consistent. And then we built in the replication functionality so you can send that over to another site. So it started out as being server storage virtualization, and then it really evolved into being a backup and a disaster recovery solution as well.
All right, this one is from Angie. Do you have a virtual lab online as well so you can see it in action?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I don't know if I can get into it right now. Maybe I can. Let's see if I know the password for it. I don't think I know the password for this off by heart, but we can log into this. This one isn't behind a firewall. It's just it's a remote cluster that you can log into. So if you want to reach out, I didn't mention the best way to contact. It's probably channel at scaleComputing.com. We can get you set up with a login for our remote cluster, and then it's basically just going in here and creating a new user. So we'll create a new user for you. You can go log in. You can play around. We just ask that you be respectful if there's going to be anywhere from tens to hundreds of people in the cluster at any point in time.
Okay, well, that looks like that's all we have for questions. And if anyone's submitted one and we didn't get to it, we'll try to follow up with you after today. So there
was actually one more piece I wanted to touch on here, if you don't mind. I did forget to show you the US Unity side of it. So we had the Robo site, which is a single node there. You'll see instead of being 3 blocks as a 3-node system, it's just one single block. Outside of that, the functionality, everything is exactly the same. You can still run VMs on it. Obviously, you don't have the redundancy of a 3-node system. Now on the US Unity side, we mentioned it's running on Google, but from an end user perspective, they don't see anything with Google. It just looks like that single node with the amount of resources that we gave to it. So it's all the exact same functionality. The nice thing about this is it's got the layer 2 software-defined networking built in under the hood of it. So if you're running this US prod cluster and you're replicating everything up to US Unity and you needed to do a failover, you actually don't need to make any DNS changes. It'll look like it's on your local LAN. So if something happens to that US prod cluster, maybe there's a power outage, something happened in the data center, everybody would still be able to connect in and they wouldn't have to make any changes. Just power it up on US Unity and everything would be up and running and look like it's local. Imagine there might be a couple more questions from that.
Yeah, if anyone has a question about that, go ahead and submit that in. If not, we can always follow up. But as the attendees try to submit here, I'll go through some reminders. If anyone missed any part of today's presentation, a reminder that you will get a link in an email in about 24 hours to be able to view this on demand, so look for that. Also, before we close out today, make sure to look in the handout section where you can download some more information there. So I think, Scott, that's about it on questions.
No problem. If you guys do have any other questions, I just popped it back over to the slide with the contact information. Feel free to reach out to channel at scalecomputing.com. The handouts there does also have a link to our partner registration page. If you fill that out, it'll come to our channel team. We'll reach out to you. We'll have a conversation. The best way the best scenario I usually say is if you have a scenario where you think this might be a good fit, reach out to us. Let us put a comparison together from what you'd be considering traditionally, and we can compare those side by side. So you can see it in a live scenario.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott, for the great presentation and walking us through that demo. Really got to get a lot of great insight today. We want to thank Scale Computing for sponsoring this great webinar. And we'd like to thank all of you for attending today. We'll look forward to another one in the future and look forward to having some great content lined up.